The rain fell softly, a rhythmic patter against the stained windows of the office that had become Jake's temporary sanctuary. He was 12 years old, yet he often felt the weight of the world on his small shoulders, moving from one foster home to another like a forgotten package, unwanted, alone, and searching for a sense of belonging. Each home felt like a fleeting illusion of family, only to vanish as soon as the social worker claimed it was time to move on. Today, however, as he shuffled through the stack of mail destined for his current foster parents, one envelope caught his eye. It stood out among the usual clutter of bills and junk mail, a thick white envelope, sealed with a formal wax stamp, embossed with a crest that seemed both old and regal. Jake's heart raced as he gingerly tore it open, a sense of cautious curiosity flooding over him. Inside, he found a letter addressed to him from a law firm he had never heard of. The first few lines felt like they were in a different language. Words like inheritance and property danced on the page, slowly stitching together a picture that made his breath hitch. He had inherited a factory, a dilapidated factory, from an uncle he had never met, an uncle whose existence had slipped through the cracks of his family history. The letter continued to explain that the factory, though in ruins, was now his to reclaim. The news stirred something within him, a flicker of possibility that momentarily banished the shadow of isolation that typically loomed over him. Suddenly, this place, this factory, emerged as a potential anchor in his turbulent life. Jake's mind raced with questions. What kind of uncle would leave him something like this? Why had he never heard of him before? And, most importantly, what did this mean for Jake? As excitement mingled with apprehension, he clutched the letter tightly, as if afraid the moment would evaporate if he let it go. Could this be his chance? Could this factory represent something more than mere bricks and mortar? The faded memories of his parents and the countless times he had felt misplaced washed over him. With a mix of uncertainty and newfound hope bubbling inside, he made a decision. He would visit the factory. He had to see it for himself. After all, the possibility of a new beginning sparked a sense of thrill deep within him. For a brief moment, Jake's heart swelled with anticipation, reminiscent of the time he had dared to join the school's soccer team, an act of defiance against the specter of doubt that plagued him. But he was met with a familiar ache of apprehension. What if this factory held nothing more than broken dreams and memories of an unknown past? As he gathered his jacket and slung it over his shoulder, a subtle reminder echoed in his mind. This story wasn't just for him. He thought about the countless children who passed through similar foster care struggles, just like him. It was a call to action not just for himself, but for anyone watching to reflect on their experiences of family and belonging. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more unique stories like mine. Let's uncover this journey together. With his heart racing, Jake stepped outside into the gentle drizzle, feeling a spark of determination ignite within him. The road to the factory stretched ahead, winding into the unknown. But for the first time in a long while, Jake felt different. He didn't just want to explore an old factory. He wanted to discover a piece of himself buried within its walls. And as he began his journey, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. As Jake made his way through the winding streets, the rain had lightened into a gentle mist, enveloping the world in a soft gray veil. He felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement fluttering in his stomach with each step toward the factory. The city felt different today, as if it too sensed the weight of the moment resting on his slight shoulders. The familiar sights of worn sidewalks and aged storefronts blurred into a backdrop of potential, and amidst this haze, the image of the factory loomed in his mind. Nestled on the edge of town, the factory was a relic of a bygone era. He had witnessed its crumbling facade from a distance before, a shadow of its former self. But Jake's imagination transformed its mere existence into a grand structure full of stories waiting to be uncovered. As he approached, however, his heart sank slightly. Shattered glass glimmered like shattered dreams against the dull concrete, and the paint flaked from the walls as if in protest of what had transpired. Yet, despite its desolation, Jake felt an undeniable connection to the place. He stepped closer, his sneakers crunching on the gravel that cradled the factory's entrance. The old wooden doors hung askew, creaking as he pushed them open. The sound echoed through the cavernous space, stirring the dust that danced in the air like tiny specters. Inside, the scent of mildew mingled with something earthy and organic, a mix of decay and history. The vastness of the room swallowed him whole, and he could almost hear the faint echoes of laughter and machinery that must have once filled the air. Patches of light filtered through the broken windows, illuminating motes of dust that floated lazily in the cool, stale air. As Jake ventured further in, he marveled at the remnants of what once was. A rusted assembly line snaked its way through the room, and remnants of old machinery rested in surprising stillness, like forgotten giants. Each step he took brought new discoveries, and he felt a strange thrill wash over him. This place wasn't just an inheritance, it was a canvas, waiting for him to paint his own story on its surface. Jake reached out and brushed his fingers against the cold, pitted metal of a conveyor belt. Memories of his past began to merge with visions of what this factory might have been, a place of labor, community, and hustle. He could picture families who depended on these jobs, a thriving factory that once stood as a pillar of prosperity. But where had it all gone wrong? His thoughts were interrupted by a fluttering sound, an old newspaper stuck to the wall, hatched by time and neglect. With curiosity piqued, he pulled it free, the paper crumbling at the edges. The headline screamed a tragic tale. Local factory closes, hundreds lose jobs. As he read through the faded article, a swell of anger rose within him. It detailed the corrupt practices of his family that contributed to the factory's downfall. How could they have let this happen? Before he could dwell too long on the implications of what he had found, a glimpse of color caught his eye. Drawn to a room off the main floor, Jake pushed through a doorway, which creaked in protest. Inside, he discovered a collection of faded photographs scattered haphazardly across a small table. Striking images of smiling workers, families at picnics among the factory's equipment, it painted a picture of community and joy. With each photograph, Jake felt a bittersweet tug at his heartstrings. These faces were part of a history he had yet to fully grasp, a connection to the very community he felt so isolated from. These people were not just strangers, they were part of the narrative of his life, a heritage that had been marred by secrets and shame. He bent down to examine a photo closely. It depicted a group of men and women, arms draped around each other, beaming with pride in front of the factory's entrance. On the edge of the picture, there was a date, one he recognized, the year before the factory closed. Swallowing hard, Jake traced the outline of the smiling faces with his finger. Who were they? What had they lost when the doors were shuttered for good? Time slipped away as he immersed himself in the remnants of the past. Each finding instilled a deeper yearning within him, a desire to reclaim not just the inheritance, but the lost ideals of community and family. As he hastily gathered up the photographs, he couldn't brush away the realization that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The factory was a tangled web of his family's failures, but what if it could also become the nucleus of something new? Determined to uncover the truth of his family's legacy, Jake stood, clutching the photographs against his chest like a shield. He felt invigorated, purpose flooding through his veins. This was more than just a building. It was a challenge he was finally ready to face. Jake knew he would have to dig deep, to face both the treasures and the shadows of his family's past. As he turned to leave the room, he took one last glance at the scattered photographs, making a silent promise. He would honor their story. He would transform this factory from a reminder of shame into a venue for healing and hope. And with that thought, he stepped back out into the light, the factory behind him echoing with the weight of its untold stories, and Jake stepping boldly into his own. As Jake stepped outside the factory, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The peeling paint of the building seemed to glow warmly in the sunlight, and for the first time he felt that the factory was not only a relic of the past, but also a beacon of possibility. With the photographs clutched tightly in his hand, he wandered around the perimeter of the building. Jake had one goal in mind: to uncover more about his family's history and the reasons behind the factory's demise. He recalled the details of the letter he had received about the inheritance, but there was still so much he needed to understand. What did it mean for him to inherit something so intertwined with failure? He paused near an ivy-covered wall, taking a moment to catch his breath. In that stillness, he remembered the cracked floorboard he had noticed earlier. His heart raced as he turned to head back inside. Was there more hidden beneath the factory's surface? Jake re-entered the building, the feeling of anticipation surging through him again. He made his way back to the main floor, where dust hung in the air like a fine mist, swirling gently with the softest breeze through the broken windows. The place felt alive, pulsing with stories waiting to be discovered. He knelt before the cracked floorboard, noticing how it seemed to shift slightly beneath his weight. Taking a deep breath, Jake pried it open more forcefully, the old wood creaking in protest. With a little effort, he managed to lift it open entirely, revealing a dark cavity below. Inside was a hidden compartment, small but beckoning. With trembling fingers, he reached in and felt around. He pulled out a flat yellow document that sent a shiver of unease down his spine. It felt fragile yet significant, and he could see that it bore his family's name, a name that, until now, had felt like nothing more than a shadow. Squinting at the faded ink, he began to read the words carefully. Contract for transfer of ownership. The following hereby acknowledges the transfer of assets related to the closure of the factory due to unethical practices. His heart raced as he continued reading, a sinking feeling churning in his stomach. The document detailed a series of corrupt dealings, bribes, falsified reports, and the severance of workers' contracts. Each word felt like a dagger, plunging deeper into the burgeoning sense of identity he had begun to fortify. These were his people, those men and women in the photographs, families that had relied on this factory to survive. They were the community he had longed for, and now the weight of his family's actions pressed heavily against his conscience. Jake slammed the document down, frustration boiling inside him. How could they have done this? He felt anger surge through him, both towards his ancestors for their negligence and towards himself for being caught in their narrative. A small voice in his head whispered against the chaos. What will you do now? He had inherited more than just an abandoned building. He had inherited a legacy marred by sin and betrayal that was now thrust upon him. But what Jake wanted more than to dwell in shame was to make amends for the injustices that had unfolded. As that thought settled within him, an idea began to form. What if he could use this factory not just as a relic of the past, but as a place to foster change? That conviction ignited a fire in his heart. It wouldn't be easy, and he would have to face a great deal of adversity, but perhaps this was an opportunity to weave a new narrative. Jake took a deep breath, clarity breaking through the tumult as he folded the contract carefully and tucked it into his backpack along with the photographs. With renewed purpose, he headed towards the exit, a plan crystallizing in his mind. As he stepped back outside into the sunlight, a new energy surrounded him. The world felt brighter, more inviting. He would reach out to the people whose lives had been torn apart and find a way to bring them together again. He imagined organizing community meetings where he could share the truths he had uncovered and collectively discuss how to restore the factory's legacy. Together, he whispered to himself, we can rebuild. Jake paused at the entrance. The dilapidated walls, once intimidating, now felt like a challenge to embrace. He realized then that this place would no longer symbolize shame. It would serve as a bridge, a path to healing and growth. With determination in his heart, Jake took one last look at the factory before he began his journey back home. He didn't know what the future would hold or how far he would need to go, but now he had a direction: to honor those before him by forging a new path forward. And with that newfound clarity, he stepped away from the shadows of the past, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. The journey back home felt surreal as Jake walked through the streets, clutching his backpack tightly. The photographs and documents within weighed heavily on him, yet they brimmed with potential. Each step echoed with purpose. He was no longer just an orphan drifting aimlessly, but a budding catalyst for change. Once he arrived at his foster home, exhaustion threatened to creep in, but his growing excitement propelled him forward. His small bedroom, adorned only with remnants of a hurried past, felt constricting. He needed a plan, a way to turn his ideas into tangible actions. Sitting at his desk, Jake spread out the photographs and documents across the surface. Each image reminded him of the lives impacted by decisions made long before him. Grabbing a notepad, he began mapping out a vision for a community meeting to discuss the factory's future. Just as he honed in on his focus, the door creaked open. It was his foster mother, Mrs. Perkins, a kind woman with warm eyes. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked, concern lingering in her voice as she spotted the scattered papers. "Yeah, I'm all right," he replied, his enthusiasm bubbling over. "I found something important today, a factory that used to belong to my family. I think I can bring the community together and rebuild it." Mrs. Perkins' expression shifted slightly. "That's interesting," she said cautiously, "but you should be careful. Sometimes digging into family history can unearth unexpected surprises." "Mom, I need to know where I came from," Jake exclaimed, feeling a mix of eagerness and determination well up inside him. Her face softened, but the tension in the air lingered. "Your situation isn't like most," she warned gently. "Some truths can hurt, Jake." Family secrets have a way of tearing people apart rather than bringing them together. Jake swallowed hard as he processed her warning. For every truth he unearthed, doubt began to creep in. Yet he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the excitement of potentially hosting a community gathering. That evening, he got to work creating a flyer on his old laptop, the letters growing bolder as he typed, "Community meeting to rebuild our shared legacy." Each word fueled his resolve as the document took shape. Days sped by as he distributed flyers around town, conversing with people he had never met before. He introduced himself to strangers, sharing his determination to restore the factory. In return, he unearthed tales steeped in memory and emotion, families torn apart by the closure. Their stories resonated with him, intensifying his commitment to bring about change. At last, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood nervously before a crowd gathered at the local community center. The small room was filled with familiar and unfamiliar faces, each one carrying the weight of history. He took a deep breath, focused on the smiles and crumbling eyes staring back at him, and began to speak. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of us share pain surrounding the factory. Our family sacrificed to build lives around it, only to witness its closure due to greed and corruption." As he spoke, he caught sight of a woman in the back, tears glimmering in her eyes as she nodded in agreement. "We deserve to understand the truth about what happened," Jake urged, holding up the document he had so carefully unearthed. "This contract reveals dark truths about our past. Together, we must confront this head-on. Hiding from the truth will not heal our scars." Suddenly, an older man interrupted, standing erect with visible anger. "What gives you the right to open these wounds? Do you know what you're doing?" A hush fell over the room. Every heart seemed to halt as Jake felt a rush of doubt sweep over him. Was he truly exposing old wounds or offering a pathway to healing? Sensing the rising tension, Jake met the man's furious gaze. "I understand your hesitation," he replied, his voice steady yet respectful. "But if we are to rebuild, we need to acknowledge the past, painful as it may be." The older man clenched his jaw, but a flicker of curiosity replaced the anger in his eyes. "All right, kid, you're making your case," he grumbled, though he didn't sit down. "But you better be prepared for the truth to hurt. Not every skeleton stays buried peacefully." Jake's heart raced. What other layers of history might the factory and his family's legacy hold? But instead of fear, the atmosphere around him buzzed with energy, providing him with comfort and resolve. This gathering was about more than just one person. It was about the shared strength of a community desperately longing for healing. As more stories began to flow freely, Jake felt empowered by the resilience of those sitting around him. The factory was not merely a building, it was a testament to their shared experiences. Hidden beneath layers of neglect and pain lay the potential for redemption, anchored in truth and collective memory. With that understanding crystallizing within, Jake committed himself to uncovering not only the factory's past, but also his own lineage. Perhaps within those secret histories lay the power to transform, not just their narratives, but the connections that had been broken by the weight of betrayal and loss. As the meeting continued, Jake realized he was no longer just seeking to reclaim a legacy. He was forging a new narrative, one built upon understanding, openness, and hope. In that moment of clarity, Jake leaned into the truth he had always sought. He vowed to uncover the buried stories that might redeem his family's legacy and bridge the gap between the past and future. With determination fueling him, he was ready to face whatever revelations might arise. The journey ahead stretched like a vast open road, and he felt fortified by the relationships he had started to build. For the first time, Jake understood that this was just the beginning of a greater adventure, one that would not only reconnect him with his roots, but empower an entire community to reclaim its voice and destiny. Together, they could rebuild not just the factory, but also the spirit of resilience that had long been dormant within them all. The days following the community meeting were a whirlwind of frenetic energy and raw motivation. The conversations ignited by the gathering were palpable. Chatter filled the streets as people whispered about the factory, their past lives, and the hope of revitalization led by an unlikely hero, Jake. News of his efforts spread like wildfire, reaching those who had long felt silenced. Jake spent every free moment immersed in research, poring over old blueprints of the factory, newspaper clippings, and interviews with former employees. Each piece of information seemed to weave together a tale of neglect and shattered dreams, but also tenacity and resilience. He felt a connection to every story he unearthed, a collective history shaping not just the factory, but his own identity. He also engaged with members of the community, gathering their stories and hopes for the factory's future. Many had lingering resentment toward the corporate decisions that led to its closure, while others spoke of the pride that once cascaded through its halls. Every recounting served as a brick in the foundation of a renewed mission, one that would transform the factory from a symbol of despair into a beacon of unity. However, as news of Jake's ambition spread, so did shadowy whispers of dissent. The momentum that fueled the community's hope also birthed resistance. At one particularly bustling cafe, Jake overheard hushed voices. A group of older men sat at a corner table, visibly disgruntled. He caught snippets of their conversation, the undercurrent of animosity palpable. "This kid doesn't know what he's messing with," one man grumbled. "That factory held secrets. We should leave it buried." Jake's heart sank. He realized the fight for the factory's legacy would not be straightforward. There were factions within his community, those who yearned for rebirth and those who desired to keep the past hidden, convinced it was too treacherous to confront. He approached the table, courage overtaking apprehension. "Excuse me," he interjected, "I couldn't help but overhear. I want to understand your concerns about the factory." The men exchanged skeptical glances before the gruff man who spoke earlier replied, "You think you know what's good for us? You're just a kid. You have no idea what went down in there." Jake steadied himself. "Maybe not, but I want to listen. I believe we can learn from the past rather than running from it." "Learn? The past is what ruined many lives, kid. There are things that should stay in the dark, another man chimed in. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. I understand it's painful, but burying it won't bring back what we lost. This is about rebuilding, together. The men scoffed, clearly unimpressed, and the conversation faltered as they turned their backs to him. Frustrated, Jake left the cafe with no answers but a profound sense of determination. Who were these men to decide what truths the community should face? The very fabric of their existence depended on confronting the past, not ignoring it. Tension hung heavily in the air as Jake organized the next community meeting. He planned to address the growing division within their ranks, hoping to cultivate unity and squash out the dissent. The room buzzed as people gathered, but he could feel an undercurrent of fear disguised as skepticism. As he stepped up to the makeshift podium, he took a deep breath. Thank you all for being here. I know things have been tense. Some of you may feel apprehensive about the past, and I understand. But we must remember why we began this journey in the first place. Together, we can shape the future. Just then, a tall man in a worn leather jacket stood up, anger simmering in his eyes. Shape the future? You're just digging up pain. We've suffered enough. Let the dead lie. They don't need another heartache. The murmurs around the room grew louder. Jake held up a hand to quiet the crowd. I promise you, I am not here to cause more pain. My intention is to create dialogue and bring awareness to the history that binds us. Can we not learn from our mistakes? A voice interrupted from the back. But what if the mistakes aren't just mistakes? What if there are people who were harmed? What if someone was responsible for those closures? Jake's stomach tightened at the implications. All the more reason we should look into it. We should investigate any injustice to ensure it never happens again. As the debate raged, Jake countered concerns with passion and sincerity. Slowly, some members began to adopt his perspective, but the disruption within the community festered like an untreated wound. For every voice raised in agreement, another echoed doubt. Later that night, as Jake sat at his desk reviewing notes, he heard a soft knock on his door. It was Mrs. Perkins, her brow creased with concern. Jake, I just wanted to check in. I heard the meeting didn't go as smoothly as you hoped. Yeah, he said, running a hand through his hair. There's just so much division. Some people won't even consider what I'm saying. They're scared. Mrs. Perkins nodded, sympathy in her eyes. Fear can be a powerful motivator, both to resist change and to spur action. Sometimes the truth cuts deeper than we expect. Jake felt the weight of her words. What if I can't bridge the gap? What if my efforts only drive us apart? Then it's essential to continue the conversation. Emphasize your dedication to transparency and healing. The truth can be painful, but is often the path to true reconciliation. The following day, Jake returned to the factory, the memories of its faded glories swirling in his mind. He paced the abandoned halls, envisioning the life once teeming within. Laughter and toil echoed through his thoughts. The potential to revitalize not just the factory, but the community was nearly tangible. He envisioned a team, a broader coalition built upon the diversity of voices and stories longing to be heard. Each corner of the factory could house a narrative of resilience, of loss, of hope. That evening, with a renewed sense of purpose, he decided it was time to address the growing divide publicly. It was clear to him that if they were to move forward, they needed to confront those skeletons lurking in the shadows. Jake put together a more robust plan for the next community meeting, one that would include open dialogue, testimony from community members, and perhaps even a formal invitation for those seated skeptically at the back table. They needed to be a part of this together, or the past would continue to haunt them. As he prepared, he recalled Mrs. Perkins' words about the painful truths and understood that these revelations could challenge what people thought they knew about themselves and their community. When meeting came around again, his heart thumped in anticipation. Fear and resolve intermingled inside him. As he approached the microphone, He knew he would need to get uncomfortable to spark change. Those lurking doubts would challenge not just him, but every person present in that room. But if honesty were the bridge forward, then he would be that bridge, and he would lead the charge toward unveiling both the hope and the pain intertwined in their community's story. The atmosphere in the community center was electric as Jake stood before the audience, feeling the weight of their expectations. The room buzzed with a mixture of skepticism and hope, each person's face reflecting their unique connection to the factory and the hidden scars it left behind. "Thank you for coming tonight," Jake began, his voice steady but infused with emotion. "We've all felt the impact of the factory's closure, but we have also a chance to reclaim our legacy, not just through those walls, but through our shared stories." As he spoke, he scanned the room, noting the wary expressions of those seated at the back, who had been particularly resistant to his plans. "Tonight, I want to invite anyone willing to share their story, your experience with the factory. Together, we can unveil the truth and foster healing." Annie, who had spoken previously, rose when Jake called her name. Her voice quivered initially, but grew more confident as she recounted her father's dedication to the factory. "He worked tirelessly, and when it closed, it didn't just end a job, it altered our entire family's future. We lost more than income, we lost pride and purpose." Jake watched as the crowd began to connect with her words. The animated discussions underscored the grief they all shared, and the urgency to confront it. One by one, others stepped forward, sharing the struggles they faced once the factory shut down. They spoke of lost jobs, broken promises, and the shared despair that echoed through the community. With each story, the division in the room seemed to diminish, with more people nodding in solidarity. Despite the growing camaraderie, the hostility simmered just beneath the surface. Jake recognized the man from the back, Phil, the former factory manager. He stood abruptly, challenging the sentiments filling the room. "You think you know the whole story?" Phil scoffed, his tone dripping with condescension. "I was there. I made tough calls to save the company. There's a bigger picture you're all ignoring." Jake's heart raced. "But living people, our families were affected. Numbers don't capture the pain." Phil's rigid facade seemed unyielding as he shot back. The factory wasn't just a family enterprise. It was a business. If you can't see the necessity behind those hard decisions, you'll never understand how things really work. "Just because it was a business doesn't mean it didn't ruin lives," Jake countered, his passion breaking through the tension in the room. "What gives you the right to dismiss our pain?" The crowd began murmuring in support of Jake, sensing the building conflict. He could feel their solidarity bolstering him, which fueled his conviction that they must stand against the apathy Phil represented. Jake paused, then took a deep breath. "This meeting is about confronting our past, not hiding from it. Phil, your decisions impacted generations, and it's necessary for us to hear how those choices rattled families and communities." Phil tried to maintain his bravado, but the expressions around the room were shifting, fueled with emotion and collective resolve. The energy in the community center seemed to bolster Jake's voice, transforming it into something powerful. "We must acknowledge the stories that need to surface, even if they reveal uncomfortable truths. Only then can we build a future that honors those sacrifices." In that moment, Jake felt a flicker of doubt in Phil's demeanor, a realization that his reign of excuses, buried behind corporate jargon, wouldn't hold against the tide of personal accounts flooding the room. The weight of the moment felt heavy but liberating, as they peeled back layers of silence that had shrouded their community for too long. Then, transforming their vulnerability into strength, others voiced their agreement, reinforcing the sense of movement among them. The tide began to turn completely from Phil's dismissiveness to a rally for unity driven by shared experiences. Jake encouraged more stories, creating an opportunity for vulnerable truths to spill forth, one after another. From job losses to emotional tolls, each narrative a testament to resilience and courage intertwined with grief. As the meeting unfolded, the sound of shared tears and laughter echoed through the hall, a chorus resounding through the hearts of all present. Each voice that rose fostered a newfound solidarity that stretched toward embracing the narrative together, shunning the fear of facing what had long been hidden. The rush of emotion carried them through the evening as more voices joined in the chorus of change. Jake felt buoyed by the unity growing until he turned to see Phil slump back against the wall, visibly defeated. The facade of indifference cracked, revealing the human beneath who was no longer able to dismiss the rawness of emotion cascading around him. As testimonials subsided, Jake stepped forward one last time, feeling the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. Tonight, we faced fear together. We took the first steps toward understanding our past, but it's only the beginning. It's time to pursue the truths we've avoided for too long, for the sake of moving forward. Jake's expression shifted, addressing Phil directly. As a community, we'll dig deeper into the past of the factory and its closure. The truth isn't a means of tearing each other down. It is a tool for building a shared legacy. The room erupted in applause and cheers as they heeded Jake's call for action, ready to stand against the ghosts of their past. In that moment, he understood that this confrontation was not just necessary, it was also the foundation upon which they would rebuild their future. Still, Jake could hardly shake the feeling that there were more secrets waiting to be revealed, lurking just below the surface. But for tonight, they had forged vital connections, bringing unity out of division, a promise that they would not let the shadows of the past destroy their dream for a brighter legacy. The feeling of hope and togetherness revitalized Jake as they began to discuss their next steps, igniting the community's momentum. They were now on the verge of uncovering the truths that lay hidden within the factory walls, ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the weeks following the pivotal meeting, the coalition began to take shape. Drawn together by a shared purpose, community members united to reclaim their legacy and breathe new life into the old factory. Jake spearheaded the efforts, enlisting volunteers for various projects, and excitement was palpable as they began to brainstorm ideas for the factory's future. One Saturday morning, under the bright spring sun, the coalition organized a factory walk, encouraging the community to gather at the site. Flyers were posted around town, each adorned with handwritten messages about the factory's legacy, inviting families and children to participate. For the first time in years, the factory pulsated with life as laughter and chatter echoed across the grounds. Jake welcomed everyone with a passionate speech, addressing the importance of remembering their shared history. Today isn't just about the factory, it's about the families that built it, the stories that have shaped us, and the dreams that can revive our community. As people shared their memories, fond recollections mixed with heartfelt stories of loss, Jake observed the transformation in the atmosphere. The factory, once a symbol of despair, morphed into a space of unity and hope. Each tale brought forth feelings of nostalgia, and nostalgia vital for confronting their past. As the gathering continued, the energy was electric, with community members expressing their commitment to rebuilding. Jake presented plans for converting the factory into a community center, where individuals could gather for workshops, events, and cultural activities. He envisioned a vibrant space where stories could be shared, art could be created, and collaboration could blossom. The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits lifted, and the possibility of change igniting a fervent desire to join the cause. Local businesses offered donations and sponsorships, recognizing the revitalization effort as a chance to foster community ties. Media coverage captured their journey, amplifying their message and drawing in support from neighboring towns. However, Jake remained mindful of the shadows that still loomed over them. This task force persisted about the factory's closure, hinting at hidden truths that could complicate their progress. The need for accountability nagged at him. I think it's time to delve deeper into the history, understand the decisions that led us to this point, Jake voiced during a meeting with Mrs. Perkins. She nodded, her expression serious. The truth can be heavy, Jake, but it will guide us toward genuine healing. In the spirit of transparency, Jake proposed forming a task force within the coalition dedicated to investigating the factory's past. They would seek out those who had been involved and gather stories to validate what had been swept under the rug for too long. This task force will help us not only solidify our future, but also give voice to those whose stories have been overlooked, Jake explained. It was time to confront the past directly and ensure that it could inform their plans moving forward. As the coalition prepared for their next steps, Jake felt a tangible excitement in the air. For the first time, the factory symbolized potential rather than loss. The dreams of the community were shining through shared memories and renewed purpose. At the heart of it all was Jake's unwavering determination to heal the wounds inflicted upon their community. The factory walk was just the beginning. Now they were ready to reclaim their narrative fully. With walls slowly coming down, Jake could sense that together they could replace the shadows of the past with the light of new beginnings. The echoes of laughter that filled the air were a reminder that change was happening. Though obstacles lay ahead, the coalition was more than ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. For each step they took together, they drew closer to a vibrant future, fueled by their collective history and a unified vision for their beloved factory, a legacy built on understanding, storytelling, and the spirit of resilience.